Before we begin, this episode contains adult language and distressing concepts. We've used voice actors to bring you the words spoken in court. If he's lied and she's lied, how do we get to the truth? That's the central question Justice Michael Lee was asking on a critical day in the Bruce Lehrmann defamation matter. Final submissions by the barristers. On Thursday, Matthew Collins KC and Sue Chrysanthu SC put the final cases for their clients, Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, arguing they'd published the truth and were reasonable in doing so in a 2019 Project interview with Brittany Higgins, in which she called Lehrmann a rapist. We'll get to their submissions in a moment, but first we're going to take a look at what Justice Michael Lee was interested in. On Friday, after he hears from the barristers for Bruce Lehrmann, Lee will retire to consider his verdict and write reasons. He'll be back sometime in the next weeks or months with a decision. But for now, at least, this is what is causing his ears to prick up. First, the judge's belief both Bruce Lehrmann and Brittany Higgins have not told the truth. This is the judge discussing that with Matthew Collins for Network 10. We've used voice actors.
One of the challenges in this case seems to me that the two principal witnesses have real credit issues.
They do, Your Honour.
And various parts of each witness's evidence simply can't be accepted, it seems to me.
And we agree. In respect of both key protagonists, we will seek to persuade Your Honour that there was a qualitative difference between the dishonesty of Mr Lehrmann and the successful credit attacks that were levelled at Ms Higgins.
The judge said it was important not to assume that just because someone lies, they're lying about everything.
I've got lies, on one view of it, from Mr Lehrmann about what was occurring that night. I do have a series of what I'll be invited to find are lies told by Ms Higgins about various aspects of it. I don't read between the lines. I've got to find facts.
Justice Lee zeroed in on Higgins' phone, in particular the infamous bruise photograph, which Higgins claimed had survived despite most other material on her phone being mysteriously wiped.
I was curious as to why it was that there was an extant photograph of the bruise in existence in February 2021. The police were asking for access to that photograph in February 2021, and yet by the time she handed over her phone, that photograph was gone.
Matthew Collins pointed out that the ACT's Director of Public Prosecutions, Shane Drumgold, had used the bruise photo in the criminal trial and suggested it'd be unfair if the project wasn't allowed to have used it back in 2021. The judge made a pointed remark.
That presupposes it was appropriate for the DPP to put it before the jury in a criminal trial.
The judge also focused the lawyer's attention on the exact imputations in the case. That is, what Lehrmann says defamed him in the project report. The imputations are that Bruce Lehrmann raped Brittany Higgins in Minister Linda Reynolds' office in 2019, that he continued to rape Brittany Higgins after she woke up and was crying and telling him to stop at least half a dozen times, that he, whilst raping Brittany Higgins, crushed his leg against her legs so forcefully as to cause a large bruise, and finally, that after he finished raping Brittany Higgins, he left her on a couch in a state of undress with her dress up around her waist. Ten and Lisa Wilkinson have to prove those imputations are true. The judge was interested in examining the definition of rape. Matt Collins said, according to the dictionary, it's to have sexual intercourse with a person without consent or while being reckless as to whether that person consented. The tricky bit of this case is that Higgins said he raped her. Lehrmann said no sex occurred at all. So the judge has to work out what happened in that room. Matt Collins said if the judge finds sexual intercourse did occur, but isn't persuaded it was non-consensual or reckless, that would create a wicked situation where Lehrmann had lied in both his criminal trial, which was aborted without a verdict, and this defamation trial. Collins said if the judge finds there was sex but not rape, Lehrmann could win but should get no damages. Michael Lee said he needed to be positively persuaded that the rape took place. not just that it was the most likely explanation. Matthew Collins said because the project did not name Lehrmann, even if the judge finds in his favour, he should award either no damages or minimal damages. He mentioned prior cases where a plaintiff has won but been awarded just a penny or $10 because the judge thinks they deserve no more.
We submit Mr Lehrmann was revealed to be a fundamentally dishonest man who was prepared to say or do anything he perceived to advance his interests. He was wholly unconcerned with giving the court an honest account of the events of the 22nd and 23rd of March 2019.
Collins laid out the areas in which he said Lehrmann had lied, about being attracted to Higgins, about buying her drinks, about encouraging her to drink, about touching and kissing her at the karaoke bar 88 MPH, and about why he needed to go back to Parliament after 1 a.m. Collins said crucial pieces of evidence about whether the rape occurred were that he rushed out of Parliament 40 minutes after entering, leaving Higgins alone, that she was found naked at 4:20 a.m. by a security guard, and that Lehrmann lied to his bosses about why he'd been there at all.
His answer was, we would submit, the closest he ever got to being honest about it. I don't want to go into that, according to Ms Brown's notes.
Collins said that there were successful attacks on both Lehrmann and Higgins in the witness box, but he said they revealed very different individuals. Bruce Lehrmann's explanation about why he went back to Parliament was that he had to make handwritten notes for question time about something he'd heard at the Dock pub that night about the French submarine contract.
The question time explanation is simply absurd. Your Honour couldn't accept it. It was 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. He was drunk. There was no question time for at least 10 days. He had already resigned. He had no further work to be doing anyway. He had no responsibility for French submarines. The people at the dock were mostly aides de camp, who he described as handbag carriers.
The judge commented on this.
It strikes one as potentially convenient that it's the only sort of work that one could do. Presumably, a 23-year-old usually works on a computer, and pulling out a biro, working on a question time brief, is the only sort of work that one can imagine where there wouldn't be some indication of whether or not you'd accessed your computer in that time.
Collins said it was extraordinary that Lehrmann had
no believable account of what he was doing during those 40 minutes.
Matt Collins said although it was true Brittany Higgins had admitted telling some lies, they were relatively inconsequential. For example, she told Lisa Wilkinson in the project pre-interview that Lehrmann must have removed her underwear. The truth is she was not wearing underwear, and she admitted lying about this because she was embarrassed. Higgins had believed her dress was hiked up around her waist, but later accepted that she was completely naked when found by a security guard.
Your own assessment of the credibility of the core allegation is precisely the type of thing that a traumatised drunk person might make a mistake about upon waking up the following morning.
Collins raised Lehrmann's claim that Higgins made up the rape allegation to save her job. He said it just didn't make sense. Once her job was safe, why would she 2 years later revive the whole thing? Here's what the judge said was a possibility.
She chooses the mode by which she does that. It's not to reactivate the Australian Federal Police complaint. It's to use the medium of her boyfriend to do it in such a way as to go to the media. What is clear is a design to inflict maximum political damage, arguably to obtain a greater end, that is cultural change in the Parliament, etc.
The judge pointed out that she only went back to police after the project's producer, Angus Llewellyn, told her partner, David Shiraz, an active police complaint was essential for the story to be publishable. Collins raised another possible twist. What if the judge found it was reasonable for Ten to publish the rape allegation, but not the allegation of a political cover-up?
Why would the defendants be punished by having to pay damages to Mr Lehrmann, where his only complaint is in respect of the rape allegation?
The judge said a possible riposte to that would be this.
That might be because journalists are required to act in some way responsibly and publish things reasonably. And if you make a completely irresponsible and unreasonable allegation, then maybe the price you pay is that you lose the ability of the statutory qualified privilege defence. There is an importance in long-form journalism, exposing wrongs in respect of government and political matters. But the law has put in guardrails to say, well, that has to be done reasonably.
The judge has been curious about why David Shiraz has not been called to give evidence.
He's like the prophet Elijah in this case. There's always a place at the table, but he never turns up.
Collins said there was no forensic advantage in putting Shiraz in the witness box because Higgins first claimed rape in 2019, more than a year before she even met Shiraz. Coming up, a new theory about why Lehrmann might have lied. A detail that's often lost in the story of Brittany Higgins and Bruce Lehrmann is that he had a girlfriend at the time the assault allegedly occurred. But it popped up early in the closing submissions given by colourful defence barrister Sue Chrysanthou SC. She's representing Lisa Wilkinson in the defamation suit brought by Lehrmann. Justice Michael Lee said the evidence pertaining to Lehrmann's former girlfriend was light on. He also said it was odd that Lehrmann didn't return any of her 6 missed calls.
It just struck me as odd that if you were sitting in your office and decide to go out to dinner with one of your mates and then you kick on, you would think that at some stage of the night there would be contact with the girlfriend.
This is significant because one of Bruce Lehrmann's many explanations for returning to Parliament House with Higgins was to collect his keys, which he says he'd left at his desk.
And he makes no attempt to call her to see if she can open the door before he leaves the nightclub. He doesn't call her despite the fact that she's been calling him repeatedly when he leaves Parliament House or at any point that night.
But you would say that's a factor. A 23-year-old male, drinking, previously thought Ms Higgins was attractive. Shortly before going to Parliament House, if I accept Miss Gaines' evidence, they were all over each other and kissing. No contact with the girlfriend. That's a series of factors which could lead up to a conclusion that he might not have been playing with a straight bat with the girlfriend.
The judge asked this about a potential explanation.
One of the curiosities of this case, if one was to find that there had been some activity of a sexual nature, is what on earth would be in someone's mind if you in fact knew that you'd engaged in sexual relations. Why would you make up such an elaborate fancy? Why wouldn't it be better for you to say, well, I thought she was happy to come back to Parliament. It'd be a narrative that'd be quite difficult to overcome.
It depends at which point the lie is told, because in 2019, the lies are told to get into Parliament House, to have sex and to hide it from the girlfriend.
Then Chrysanthou turned to why Lehrmann might have lied in 2021 when he was interviewed by police. Chrysanthou noted that Lehrmann had 2 previous lawyers, Warwick and John Corn. She put it to the judge, just hypothetically, that by the time he was interviewed by police in April 2021, he'd watched a Four Corners program on the Higgins allegation, in which security guard Nicola Anderson said Higgins was extremely drunk.
This is just hypothetical. A very intelligent criminal lawyer would say, mate, a person in that position can't consent.
So Chrysanthou was suggesting that Lehrmann had initially blustered through a lie to his bosses back in 2019, but that in 2021 he doubled down on the lie after realising Higgins must have been too drunk to consent.
One has to wonder if Mr Lehrmann's just a compulsive liar, which doesn't help us because a compulsive liar doesn't have consciousness of guilt. They just lie. Or whether the lies that have been told were directed to covering up the fact he had sex with Ms Higgins. And we say it can't really be in any doubt in anyone's mind that there was sex, and that the only issue that would trouble Your Honour, having regard to the unsatisfactory state of evidence by both persons, is the consent issue.
She rattled off what she said were Lehrmann's lies.
He says he receives a message from Ms Higgins while he's at the Kingston Hotel inviting him out. Where's that message? Not on her phone, not on his phone. It's like the person on the grassy knoll. For the first time in evidence, we hear about the second phone he had that night. Maybe that's where he called his girlfriend from. Who knows? We think it's a lie that he had two phones with him. You cannot see two phones on the CCTV footage. Now, importantly, all of the CCTV that night shows Mr Lehrmann glued to his phone. He loves his phone. He's always looking at it at every venue, including when he's walking down the corridor with Higgins to the lift. The notion that the phone is upside down and on silent, such that he missed 5 or 6 phone calls from his girlfriend in 40 minutes, is hard to accept, having regard to the attachment he clearly had to his phone. So we say that's another lie, that he was ignoring the phone calls from his girlfriend because he was having sex with Ms Higgins. The question for Your Honour is, why was she naked? If they didn't have sex, why was she naked? Did she just get hot? On balance, Your Honour would be satisfied that there was sex that occurred.
Lisa Wilkinson said in the witness box she believed there was a political cover-up of the rape. She said repeatedly she knew how politics worked. But her own barrister said the opposite, that the project did not allege there was a political cover-up.
My client had very strong views and beliefs as to what should be included, and she had strong beliefs about the conduct of certain players in the affair. But ultimately, you're to look at what was actually published, not what was said in text messages. The word cover-up is not there. Systemic cover-up is not there.
The judge wasn't convinced.
I just really do find that a very difficult construction of what went to air. The whole piece is pregnant with the notion that these were people stopping her from being able to report, who engaged in a course of conduct to prevent her from reporting this allegation to the police.
We disagree. We wholly disagree with that, Your Honour.
I thought you might.
Wilkinson also claimed in her evidence that the program didn't say anyone else pressured Brittany Higgins to go quiet, but that she applied the pressure to herself. Chrysanthi said Wilkinson might have been the host, but wasn't responsible for anything that was wrong with the story.
Her role in the publication as to the actual content that was published was ultimately very limited as a decision maker. Now, she brought the story forward. She was the first person Mr Shiraz contacted on Ms Higgins' behalf. But then after that, her suggestions were not taken up by the producers, so she had no decision-making power as to the final content of the broadcast.
The trial continues with final submissions from Bruce Lehrmann's barristers on Friday. If you missed yesterday's episode, it's worth a listen. It's entitled All the Lehrmann Evidence You Missed. And we've got much more analysis and reporting, including up-to-the-minute courtroom updates, all day at theaustralian.com.au.